Mamas, don't let your babies grow up to be Christians. Don't let them read Bibles and pray on their knees. Protect them from Christians' mental disease. Mamas, don't let your babies grow up to be Christians. Good evening. It's Sunday, August 24th, 2008. My name is David Mills, and I'm singing you a little country song from out in the country. I'm speaking from Huntington, West Virginia, the heart of the Bible Belt. I'm author of the book, Atheist Universe. And many people tell me in email that it seems rather incongruous that someone from West Virginia, who obviously has a Southern Appalachian accent, should be an atheist. But actually it's not so hard to understand, because I grew up here, and as many of you can relate, you're inundated, you're completely saturated with religion. And so it's not at all uncommon for someone to rebel to the point where he finally starts to question whether the Bible's true, whether Christianity's true. What I'd like to do for you in a few moments is to let you hear a radio program that I participated in about 2 weeks ago in Clarksburg at WAJR. Now, even though I've done many radio and television interviews about the book over the last couple of years, I have deliberately not done any in West Virginia, my home state. And there are two reasons for this. First of all, West Virginia is completely Christian, 97% I saw of the last statistics. So I'm not going to sell any books here. Nobody's going to listen. I'm just pissing in the wind. The second reason I never did a local interview was because of what I dubbed in an article a couple of years ago, the Nazareth effect. Now that refers to Jesus growing up, allegedly, in the city of Nazareth, where nobody paid any attention to him because he was just one of the locals. So no matter how far-reaching your readership might be across the country or across the world, people in your own location are always going to view you as some local person because you are a local person. But I received an invitation from a gentleman named Reuben Perdue, who's the news director at WAJR. He made me a very good offer. They provided me very lavish accommodations. In fact, the best hotel I ever stayed in was just a couple of weeks ago at their expense. But Reuben was very knowledgeable, very courteous, and as you'll hear in the interview, Reuben knew as much about the arguments as I did. In fact, after the show, we had lunch together for about 3 hours, after which I took out paper and pencil and made notes on some of the things that Reuben said, because he had proffered arguments against Christianity that I'd never considered before. So the first half of the show was very cordial, very friendly, somewhat like Meet the Press. It was a very convivial atmosphere and very pleasurable. No big deal. It's happened a lot before. But what made this show a little bit different, and that's why I'm wanting you to hear this, is that Reuben then opened the phone lines. And we had some viewer, or should I say listener, phone-in questions from right here in West Virginia. There was a gentleman who claimed he could heal amputees that he had seen missing limbs regenerated. I was threatened. Reuben was threatened over the air, and I'll let you listen for yourself. I'm alone here in West Virginia. I, until fairly recently, was myself married to a Baptist fundamentalist. She was a fine person. I have nothing unkind to say about her. But we were not compatible. I've yet to meet anyone else, so if you are an available, free-thinking female, you know where I am. I hope you enjoy the show, the radio show. If you do, send Reuben an email. Thank him for being so friendly to the atheist cause. He's suffered more than his fair share of criticism for having me on, and I hope that you will thank him for supporting our cause. Almost hell, West Virginia. Let's see. I'm going to have to put some graphic on the screen. Put my hat. Put the book.
From the WAJR FM newsroom, here's Reuben Perdue.
Good morning. You know the routine. 623-3865 is our phone number. Email inbox is rperdue@wvradio.com. And it's the show we've been talking about and promoting for the last week. Joining me in studio today to discuss the topic of religion is renowned atheist author David Mills, and he's published 3 books now. Perhaps the leading one, or the one most familiar to our listeners, would be Atheist Universe. Was that your first book or your second? Atheist Universe was your second book, wasn't it?
That was the third book.
That was the third book.
I wrote my first book in 1979 when I was just 19 years old, and went about 15 more years before writing another, the second. And then Atheist Universe came out in 2004.
Well, you've done several national radio appearances. I appreciate you coming over here to do to appear on our little corner of the world here in Clarksburg today. It's been a hot topic on this show before when we've talked about religion. I suspect we'll have plenty of phone calls and emails here today. So if I look like I'm multitasking, it's not that I'm not paying attention. I'm checking our phone lines and I'm checking our email inbox over here to my left and to my right. The phone lines are open. So is our email inbox. If you have questions or would like to maybe engage in discussion with Mr. Mills here today, we will certainly open up and take your phone calls and emails at any point. Let's first start by talking, David, about well, I guess let's just lay the framework. You're born and raised here in West Virginia, I believe, a pretty Christian state. At what point, how do you come to the conclusion and make the step and the jump in your life to make the declaration that you're now an atheist?
Well, like many people in the state, I was born and brought up Baptist. Lived in Huntington, still live in Huntington. And for about the first 15 years of my life, I was a pretty typical Baptist. Then when I began high school, I started associating with some individuals who were very charismatic, very evangelical in their religious beliefs. And that was contagious. And so I joined the Campus Crusade for Christ and was found at lunchtime at high school passing out religious tracts. And I even considered going into the ministry as a missionary. And in order to gather ammunition to hopefully share the gospel, to prove the gospel, to convert others to Christ, I started doing research. But the more I read and the more I found out about the subject, the less convinced I was of the validity of the Bible. And it was a period, perhaps 2.5 years thereafter, that I became an atheist. It wasn't an overnight event like the road to Damascus.
So you kind of went from one extreme to the other.
Yes.
And is it your experience that most people who have come out and announced themselves as atheists have gone down a similar road or have gone in that sort of extreme transition?
Yes, almost without exception. Now, Ellen Johnson, who's head of American Atheists, has always been an atheist. She was reared by atheist parents. But Dan Barker, for example, who's head of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, recently had a case before the Supreme Court. He was a fundamentalist pastor. And almost without exception, the people that I encounter, readers of my book, were former religious devotees, yes.
The one thing, and I don't want to, I know you've done several of these radio interviews, so I'm going to try to avoid the cliche questions other than that first one everybody asks you.
Those are the best ones.
I want to get into more of the meat of the discussion here. I wish we had you here for a couple of days. Unfortunately, it's just for today. So let's start talking about the subject itself and some of the debate that comes up when you discuss religion. The one thing that stands out to me, David, and I'm sure that you've seen this before, you've talked about it in your book, is that when you're discussing religion and the fact that people accept it on blind faith, so to speak, it seems like there's a double standard when applying rational scrutiny to other phenomena. For example, UFOs. The things that to a normal, rational person seem so far-fetched that they're laughable, when you rationally discuss and examine Christianity, there's a double standard because rationally a lot of it doesn't hold up, but it's supposed to be accepted on blind faith.
Well, I don't think you should reject any proposition, however far-fetched it sounds, without an investigation. For example, quantum mechanics sounds preposterous to me, but I know through 100 years of scientific research that it's a very valid science. I don't wholly dismiss the UFO claims, though I haven't seen any convincing evidence that that's so, and I don't immediately dismiss the idea of there being a God. I think that's one of the most fascinating subjects that we could possibly discuss. And I spend a great deal of my time reading books written by Christian apologists. And so I don't dismiss it out of hand.
And maybe this is something you found in people you've come in contact with. I'm one of those people who I truly want to believe, but what I have a problem with is my rational and logical thought processes, taking a look at some of the evidence or lack thereof, and really coming to the conclusion that I'm just going to accept that. Do you find that that's common in someone who is studying religion and the prospect of atheism, a desire to believe that inspires them to look for the data that they unfortunately find tends to be lacking?
Absolutely. I wish it were true. I wish that I could someday see my mother again. She passed away in 1993. I loved her very much. I wish I could see her again. I wish I could live eternally. But if we substitute our wishes for reality, then it becomes wishful thinking.
Let me ask you, David, do you get a lot of people who automatically assume that atheists, by nature of their lack of faith in God or Christianity, are therefore bad people and unable to live what religious fanatics or even just the religious people would call a good, quote, Christian life?
Yes, that's one of the most pervasive smears about atheism, is that atheists have no sense of morality, no ethics, which of course is a very bigoted idea. If you were to say that about someone on racial grounds, that he's Chinese or he's African American and he therefore has no sense of ethics, well, that would be considered absolutely outrageous, as it is. But you can say that about an atheist. Well, he's an atheist, so he can't possibly have any sense of ethics.
I think, and it's something we've discussed on this show before, I think that with or without your belief in God or Christianity, there are certain things that are just human nature, things that we should do because it's the right thing to do as a human. And I think that obviously you can live a good, quote-unquote, Christian life. You can do the right things. You can treat people with respect.
Yes,
yes. I think that those are human qualities, not necessarily religious qualities, because any religion you look in has got those same qualities. They can be applied to any book that you choose to read.
Well, a lot of people, when they discuss evolution, imagine that evolution would produce a human being who was just savage and fought to the death. Well, any species of animal, human or non-human, who had the propensity to fight to the death for no reason at all would quickly drive itself into extinction. Almost all species cooperate with each other. For example, even ants, they work together in a very complex way in an ant colony, and most animals share their food with other members of the species. There is some competition, just as humans, unfortunately, have wars and things that I would prefer we didn't have. But there is an altruistic benefit to evolution.
We're going to take a commercial break so that we can stay on time. Our phone number is 623-3865. Our email inbox, rperdue@wvradio.com. When we come back, we're going to take a look at the examination of some of the scientific arguments for and against Christianity. Is there proof? Is there evidence that can substantiate the Bible? Many Christians feel there is proof. Many scientists feel there is not. We'll get into that discussion, and we invite you to join us when we come back on the morning edition right after this. Talk Radio 103.3. Welcome back in. 623-3865 is our phone number. Phone lines are open. You can also email rperdue@wvradio.com. Call in, send us questions. Our guest today is David Mills. He is an atheist and an author from right here in West Virginia. He lives in Huntington and has published 3 books on the subject. He's appeared several times on national radio and television shows to discuss the topic as well. And David, let's try to talk about some of the arguments, I guess, and the ongoing debate, which I think will never end. When I've talked about this show or talked about this topic on the show before, I've tried to look for empirical evidence, something that I can tangibly back up. And one thing I get is I've had a lot of callers and emailers say, "Well, go to answersingenesis.com or look at the Bible tells you this." You can't, if you're looking for independent data, you can't read page 1 of the Bible and then support that by reading page 43. You need independent sources. Yes. And it seems to me for some of the major historical events that are depicted in the Bible, you would think that there would be more historical references and data and more historical evidence that these things took place. A lot of these things, however, don't have reference anywhere outside of the Old Testament.
Well, you're exactly right. And people will often ask, can you point to a single scientific error in the Bible? And we have to look no farther than Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. We know from science that the universe, or the heavens, is about 13.7 billion years old, whereas the earth is slightly less than 5 billion years old. So we can say, absolutely, that the heavens, which is to say the rest of the universe, and the earth did not come into existence together in the beginning, as Genesis 1:1 says. So that's the first big error. The second is in Genesis chapter 11, we have the genealogies from Adam to Noah, from Noah to Abraham, from Abraham to David in other parts of the Old Testament, which give a chronology and tell how old each of the individuals was when he had a son or daughter. We then pick up the chronology in the New Testament from David to Jesus in Matthew chapter 1 and Luke chapter 3. And it was through this means that Archbishop James Ussher calculated several hundred years ago that the earth, according to the Bible, is about 6,000 years old. Now, many people today just don't read the Bible, don't care, don't take it literally, and that's fine. I don't take it literally either. But if you do, if you are serious about your beliefs, if you accept the Bible as written, then you must accept that the earth is about 6,000 years old. Also, according to Genesis, the great flood of Noah occurred in the year 2348 BC. Well, we know that the Egyptian civilization was alive and well before, during, and after that year. We know that the Indus Valley civilization, the Aegean civilization, the Greeks, survived. So there was no worldwide flood. So the entire book of Genesis is ridiculous. It just didn't happen.
Why is it that certain scientific evidence, when you take a look at something as simple as carbon dating, why is it that scientific evidence that contradicts the Bible is dismissed out of hand by religious apologists?
Because they start with a conclusion and dismiss any evidence that doesn't agree with that conclusion, which is the precise opposite of the scientific method. The scientific method is that we look at the evidence, and our conclusions are based upon what that evidence shows. But if we start with a conclusion and work backward, then we can believe anything.
It just seems that, science on an everyday basis is understood. People realize that, proof is proof, evidence is evidence. But yet, when there's this evidence or when there's this proof on this particular subject more than any other, it's dismissed out of hand. And for some reason, it's the scientific testing that's failed or that's flawed, and it's not the theory behind it.
Yes, I know the great astronomer Carl Sagan said that he had colleagues with whom he worked who during the week were brilliant scientists, yet who on the weekend went to church and believed the most incredible things that they would never accept if they applied the same type of thinking that they used during the week. So people, including myself, I'm sure, are a mixture of being analysts and being driven by emotion.
Another thing that happens a lot with the Bible is that many people say it's to be taken literally. Some say it's to be an evolving document. It's to be taken not quite so literally, maybe figuratively, and maybe in translation. Maybe this isn't exactly what the Bible meant. Maybe you take some things in whole, other things you take in part. For example, the story of Noah's Ark. When the Bible says Noah built this boat, took 2 of every creature, there was a worldwide flood. Well, now people, when you take a look at the science behind that and you realize that's not possible, they say, well, maybe he didn't mean a worldwide flood. Maybe it was a regional flood. Maybe he didn't mean 2 of every animal. Maybe he meant 2 of the regional animals. Well, we're talking about a society of people who didn't know the world existed beyond where they could walk or travel to.
Right. Well, the point where we are now is that people tend not to interpret the Old Testament literally. For example, the days on the first day, the second day, the third day, the creation story. They will interpret that as vast eons of time, whereas the New Testament is still to be interpreted literally. Jesus literally lived. He literally walked on water. He literally filled pigs with demons. And, by the way, if you were omnipotent, if you controlled the entire universe, what would you choose to do? Would you choose to fill pigs full of demons? Is that the most useful thing you could do? Or to spit in someone's eye?
Well, I was watching History International last night, which I love to watch because they delve into this topic so much. And I was watching The Naked Archaeologist last night and was talking about some other stories from the Bible. And they were talking specifically on a show last night about Cain and Abel. And we're talking about how God came to find out what had happened. Well, and the first question I had is, wouldn't he have already known?
Yes. It's rather funny. If you listen to the way that most people pray in church, for example, pastors will say, Dear Lord, we're gathered together this morning to worship you in Clarksburg. As if God didn't know they were already in Clarksburg. They're always telling God things that he didn't know, supposedly.
Well, and you always hear, and this is one of the things that I have an issue with that's led me to where I'm at with religion over the last few years, and that is the idea of God accepting credit for everything that happens, but not accepting blame. You always hear the athletes say, "Thank God we pulled this game out. God was on our side. We came." What would happen if a coach held a press conference and said, "I blame God for us losing this ball game. He clearly didn't want it to happen." People would go through the roof, and I don't understand why it is. And I know the claim is the devil and the demons and everything from hell and beyond. But I don't believe that you can take full responsibility and get all the credit for everything good that happens, being in control of what happens in this world, and not accept any blame for anything bad that occurs.
Well, you see, Reuben, your problem is that you're an objective individual. You can't be that way and be religious. You have to use selective observation. An example I give in the book, Atheist Universe, is suppose you have a jumbo jet crash, and there are 399 people who are killed, and 1 person survives. Well, the news media will portray this single survivor as a miracle.
Right.
There was a miracle. This 1 person survived. Whereas all of the other people who perished, that doesn't count.
Right.
That wasn't God's fault.
623-3865 is our phone number. Email inbox rperdue@wvradio.com. You guys never hesitate to call when it's just me on here talking about religion. The phone lines are open. I invite you to call and email. We'll be right back after this on the Morning Edition.
This is the Morning Edition. Join us by calling 623-3865 or email rperdue@wvradio.com. Now, back to Reuben Perdue on Talk Radio 103.3 WAJR FM.
Welcome back in. 623-3865 is our phone number. Email inbox rperdue@wvradio.com. We do have a couple of emails that I want to get to here this morning, but first let's go to the phone lines and open it up for our guest, David Mills, atheist author from Huntington, West Virginia. Caller, go right ahead. You're on the Morning Edition.
Hey, good morning, Reuben. How you doing?
I'm very good.
Hello.
Hey, I feel that the reason you're getting no phone calls, your argument is trying to bring God to a human thinking level, and it ain't going to happen. And anyone that can read the Bible and look at just prophecy that was prophesied before and is even being fulfilled today. So unless you've got a born-again experience, you're not going to understand it. No one is. It's there. You can take it or you can leave it. It's up to you. You know, God works with individuals. And religion is rules and regulations. My Christianity is a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And that didn't come when I was young. It came when I was probably 47. I'm 70 now.
Right.
And if the gentleman there, if he was raised a Baptist, you can't be raised a Baptist. You've got to be born again. And evidently, he's never had the experience. So,
well, we're all born as atheists. There's no child born who has a religious belief, and you're exactly right. We're indoctrinated thereafter into the Baptist faith or the Catholic faith or Jewish faith. So when we renounce that, we become born-again atheists.
No, well, let me say, you can be raised anything.
You can be raised, but you're not born.
Until you get the born-again experience, forget all of the raising and everything. Now, hopefully the raising will point you to where you're going to have an open heart to believe. If you come now with an honest heart to God and ask Him to show you, He will. But if it's not honest, if you're saying your preconceived convictions now are that there is no God. So, hey, you come in with that preconceived, and if you don't justify that, you're not going to go with it. So it's an individual thing. It's up to you, and I believe that you guys are trying to bring God to a human level, and it ain't going to happen.
Well, we can explain everything else in the everything else is analyzed rationally and scrutinized through science and through a human understanding. We're talking about things that are supposed to be historic events that happened on the course of this earth. How can you explain that there's no human understanding or human proof for these claims? You know, when you make a debate, the onus of proof comes on the person making the claim, and that's where we're lacking here.
If you get it down to you can put it in black and white, you're probably not going to get it there. But just the look at the nation of Israel. How in the world did it survive? How did they get their nation back? It prophesied it was going to happen. It happened. It happened in a day, just like the Bible said.
It was also prophesied, though, that every generation of people mentioned in the Bible said that Jesus would come back. It was said in the Bible He'd be back before their time was over, and that never happened.
It did not. It did not. No prophecy says He's going to come back, because no man knows the day or the hour. No man knows. It gives signs that's going to happen before, and I think they're happening real fast as we speak.
Well, every generation has felt that, though.
Pardon?
Every generation has felt that.
We don't know, but it's going to happen.
But, sir, your argument is this. We know the Bible's true because it's the Bible.
No, I know it's true because I've had the revelation in my heart from Jesus. I can't bring Him down to a discussion on a human level.
It is
I know in my heart individually.
It's completely emotional. You have these...
No emotion, it's just a fact. It's no emotion.
You have these beliefs, very strong beliefs, as I used to have, And as a result of that, you have very strong emotions. Your mistake is you're accepting your emotions. You're accepting your own emotions as proof of what you believe. Sure.
If there's no God, why are you even discussing it? What would it make any difference to you? Why would you even discuss it?
Well, because it's a very fascinating topic, and because most of the people do believe it and try to use their beliefs to impose their view upon our secular laws.
But what's that got to do with the I don't defend any of that. You know, my belief in Jesus Christ is a personal thing. It doesn't. I don't need to prove it to anyone. Now, I would try to persuade.
There's no evidence that Jesus ever existed.
There's not?
No.
You see why nobody's calling you? Your argument is completely ridiculous.
Actually, many people believe when you look at things rationally and through historical evidence, and if you would look at things, as you said, with an open heart and an open mind, you would believe that you would realize many of the claims in the Bible are ridiculous. Mm-hmm. Do you believe that a man lived inside the stomach of a whale and was regurgitated and was perfectly healthy?
It don't say whale. It says a fish, and yes, I absolutely believe that.
You think that's rational and logical?
That's what I'm saying. You're trying to bring God to a rational, logical human thinking, and it ain't going to happen. Forget it.
And by the way, in the New Testament, Jesus does refer to it as a whale. And since a whale is not a fish, a mammal, that's yet another scientific error in the Bible.
Go back to the Greek, and you'll see that that's a fish. It's not a whale. It's a great fish.
Well, then
now,
if you
it's been
agree
translated, maybe in the
if the Bible is hearsay, then we agree.
Which translation and which interpretation is the correct one? It's been handed down and changed for hundreds of years.
The original King James translation talks about unicorns, dragons, satyrs, all kinds of mythical creatures that were believed to be in existence at the time the Old Testament was written.
No. Satan was the dragon. This is not, good grief.
Was Satan the unicorn?
I don't see no unicorn.
You live in a fantasy. You live in a fantasy. There is no God. There is no Satan.
Is the Bible to be taken literally, or is it open to interpretation? Because I may interpret it completely differently from you. Who's to say whose interpretation is correct?
The Bible means what it says what it means. So there's no interpretation.
But it says dragon.
Each individual.
It says dragon, and you just said dragon is Satan. So if it means what it says, it means dragon. It also said in the Bible that that everything revolves around the earth. We now know scientifically that's not true.
I've seen the dragon that fell from heaven, and then it jumps right over to Satan. So it explains itself very well. There's no problem.
You know the Bible's true because it's the Bible, and because you feel it in your heart. And neither one of those is scientific or logical.
Revelations and proof. I was a tough nut, too, and Jesus proved to me because I asked for the proof.
I've asked for it many times.
And through miracles that you could see, he proved it. Where I laid my hands on people, and they immediately got healed. And so, he proved it to me. And I know in my heart he exists.
May I ask you a question? You said that you've placed your hands on people and God used that to heal them. Why does God never heal amputees?
There is so many mysteries out there, and this life is merely a training ground or
if God can do anything, why, if someone had no legs for, let's say, 20 years, why is there not one case where God helped an amputee?
The answer is case.
There are
many cases. There's many cases
where people were given new limbs. There's one.
Many places documented where limbs have grown back.
Well,
in
not in any of the scientific literature. Maybe in the national.
Right, because the scientific group refuses to even, and the news media, to even document any of this and put it on the news. But it is documented. But, I cannot make an argument with you. I'm just merely saying that it's up to each individual to accept or disregard. I'm hoping that they accept. I'm not trying to force it on no one. I'm through persuasion, fine. We're not Muslims who want to go out and cut somebody's heads off if they don't switch over to our agreement.
No, but not all the Muslims want to do that either, though.
Well, if they follow the Quran, they do.
Well, if they follow the Bible, we'd all be, David and I would be slaughtered outside the studio today because we're expressing a disbelief. And that's what's ordered in the Bible as well.
Absolutely not.
For 1,500 years, the Catholic Church executed witches and tortured infidels. Galileo himself was almost executed for observing the moons of Jupiter.
Now you're getting back to man thinking because it's ridiculous. You're talking about the Catholic Church. There is only one church. Church means the body of Christ, and that's all the people that's born again, denominations and all that.
Jesus himself,
things, no doubt about it.
Let's go back to the phone lines here this morning. We do have some emails as well, but let's get another call in here, 623-3865. Go ahead, Drew, on the morning edition.
Good morning, Reuben.
Good morning.
I talk to you quite often, and I noticed, I just said before your first caller called in, it's been a half an hour and he's not even had a call. But you talked about for a week that you were going to have this guy on today talking about this. Right. I'm no overly religious person. But, this man just said to the previous caller, you live in a fantasy world. There is no God. You have no more proof that there isn't a God than that man had that there is. And it's not fair to say that the man lives in a fantasy world because he chooses to have faith and believe in something that helps him get through the day. But you've talked about religion a lot of times, and I called in once before and said, you're not from this area. This is a religious area. This kind of stuff will get you into trouble. And I'm telling you, Reuben, this is not a subject that I just don't think that you want to be having a guy on your air telling people that there is no God. When you don't have, like I said, you have no more proof of what you're saying than the previous caller had of what he was saying.
Well, but everything I have found, David, just a second. Everything I have found is that in looking at history and scientific and rational data, I would tend to believe there is a greater presence of proof of a lack thereof than there is for the miraculous existence for. And I would hate to believe that I live in an area where having a type of open discussion on a logical and historic and rational topics such as this would lead people to such an extreme to call for my job.
You're saying that what you think is rational and that anyone who believes in God is not rational.
No,
you're not calling it. You're calling your argument rational. You're calling anyone who disagrees with you, anyone who believes in the Bible, anyone who believes in, a matter of fact, any religion at all. Apparently, according to your guest, anyone who believes in any religion at all is irrational.
Well, do you believe that the Earth is 6,000 years old?
I don't know how old the Earth is, and neither do you, and neither does anyone.
Oh, yes, science knows how old the Earth is. You made claims about this person was persecuted and this person was this. Yes.
You don't have any proof that happened.
We have no proof that Galileo was...
You have written record. That is it. You have no video proof that man was hung or that witches were burned. It's all based on stories handed down through generation after generation after generation.
You're being much too egalitarian about this. You think that all points of view are equally valid. That's nonsense.
No, I don't know. That you assume that I think that all points of view are equally valid. I think that you have no more proof than the caller that you just said lived in a fantasy land. And I think that when you start to throw out things like you live in a fantasy land and there is no God, to a man who was probably in his 70s or 80s, I just think that your argument goes out the window at that point. I think that you then become...
The burden of proof is upon the individual.
No, the burden of proof is not upon the individual. That man said over and over again, I'm not trying to convince you. I'm not trying to prove to you.
Well, he was trying to convince me.
He was not trying to convince you. He was stating what his beliefs are.
Well, am I not allowed?
His relationship with his God is a very personal thing, it should be.
Am I not allowed to state my views?
Absolutely. You're on the air stating your views right now.
Well, you said to Reuben that he shouldn't have someone on espousing my views.
No,
so
I said to Reuben that it was going to get him into trouble, and he would lose listeners, which I've said to Reuben before, by challenging people's faith.
You
sound very menacing.
I sound what?
He's a very open caller. He's called several times, and he's a very good caller, and he has expressed this to me before. And the thing I would say is the same thing I've said before. it would break my heart to think that I live in a place where we can't have this type of discussion without someone calling for my job because their belief is threatened, instead of having a logical debate on it. If this is the belief that guides their life, they should be willing to defend it and discuss it without fear and without a necessity to call for my job for doing it.
I've found over and over that the people who become most agitated when religion is discussed are the people who try to have it both ways, who try to see themselves as science-minded and maintaining some kind of vague religious belief. They want to have it both ways, and I think that's your view.
No, I don't really have a view. The religion topic, the religious discussion doesn't really. I had no intentions of calling this show this morning until you challenged that man lived in a fantasy land, and then you were adamant that there is no God.
Well, he says I live in a fantasy land. I'm just expressing.
I don't remember him saying that you live in a fantasy land.
Well, no,
I don't remember him saying anything.
He believes I'm going to be eternally tortured in hell for my beliefs, whereas my view of his belief is that he's simply mistaken. But no, I'm going to be tortured.
Well,
so
I don't know, Reuben.
Who's more fair?
I think that this is a topic that absolutely it should not be on your show, and that's my feeling, Reuben.
Ignorance is
there
bliss.
are so many things that we could be discussing today without having someone on here challenging people's basic faith, the thing that gets them through the day. And I'm not, and I do feel I'm a little agitated at this point, and I'm not religious. I don't go to church. I don't necessarily, I believe a lot of things in the Bible don't make any sense. But who the hell am I to judge whether or not the Bible is correct? And I'll tell you what, sir, if someday you find out that the Bible is correct, I would not want to be you.
Let me get a commercial break in here, and we'll keep ourselves on time the best we can. 623-3865 or Perdue at WVRadio.com. We'll be right back after this on the Morning Edition.
You're listening to The Morning Edition on Talk Radio 103.3 WAJR FM. If you'd like a transcript of today's show, take out your pens and start writing. Now, here's Reuben Perdue.
Welcome back in. 623-3865 is our phone number. Email inbox rperdue at wvradio.com. My guest today is David Mills, author of Atheist Universe. And, David, I'm not surprised at the tone the show is taking on. We've had some pretty emotional discussion in the past, but we've always had calm discussions. Today, I think that we're getting beyond that.
Well, that's what makes it fun, though.
Well, until they start calling for your job for trying to have a serious conversation.
Well, you have Rush Limbaugh on this station for 3 hours, then Sean Hannity for another, 2 or 3 hours every day. You've devoted 1 hour of one day to an opposing viewpoint. Now, I'm sure that some people in the audience will be outraged by that, but do me a favor, write to me and not to Reuben or the station, and I appreciate the time. If anyone does want to write to me, I have a web page. It's just davidmills.net, not .com, davidmills.net, and there's a lot of material there for free download.
Let's get another phone call in here this morning, 623-3865. Caller, do you want me fired as well?
No, I'm a Christian.
Okay.
I want you to change your ways.
Okay.
My name is Frank. I'm from Salem. You should have another person there that knows the Bible and knows Jesus Christ to talk with this guy.
But Frank,
it isn't fair to have us people who don't know how to talk properly or correctly. I heard him laugh. He laughed at when Cain and Abel, God knew that it was going to be a murder.
Frank, let me tell you.
Could I say something?
No, let me tell you this first, and then you can say whatever you want. The reason I have David on the show today is because on the 3 or 4 other days that I have talked about religion, all we have had on the show are people from churches and people from the religious standpoint. I am providing the alternative viewpoint today, and it's not fair that I don't provide that alternative viewpoint.
You should have both together all the time, even when you have the pro. But let me say this. He laughed when he talked about the murder of Abel and Cain. Well, guess what? God created us for his enjoyment, and he could have created us so we don't make any sin, but then we'd all be zombies, and that would not be any enjoyment for him. So we have to learn on our own how to become good and how to do the right things. You cannot do the Bible all the time, 100%. No one can. So he's given us times to learn. That's why all these years are going by and everything.
But you don't. But you don't.
He knew he was going to be.
You don't.
He wants that taken out of us.
You don't think people will learn what's good and what's bad, what's right and what's wrong from a humanist standpoint without a religion?
Forget about religion. God is not a religion. He's our Father. He created us. You guys believe in a Big Bang theory. Doesn't that sound childish to you? A Big Bang theory.
It doesn't.
I could laugh like you did.
Well, yes.
It doesn't. But I don't.
It doesn't
I
sound
love
as.
people.
It
I want
doesn't
you to
sound.
come to Christ.
It doesn't sound as childish as saying everything began somewhere except for God. There doesn't have to be a beginning for that. The rules of everything we know and can prove scientifically don't apply to this mythical creature. It doesn't sound as ridiculous as that when there's no historical evidence for that.
Actually, the term Big Bang was originally coined by the scientist Fred Hoyle, who intended the term as a criticism, as a means of belittling the theory, which he did not accept. Later, however, it was shown that Hoyle was wrong and that there was indeed a Big Bang, but his name continued to stick and is still used today.
David, unfortunately, we're out of time. I've got to get my last commercial break in. Like I said, I wish we could have you in for a couple of days to have this discussion. We will follow it up tomorrow. Of course, David will not be in. David, I'll tell you what, if you would like to join us by telephone tomorrow.
That would be great.
For a follow-up.
That would be great.
We can do that because we got people on the line who are not going to get through and emails we're not going to be able to get to today. Hoppy is coming up after the top of the hour. Thanks for tuning into this edition of the Morning Edition. I hope it's been educational for you, and I hope that you'll look at some of the discussion rationally and not just purely through emotion. And when I say rationally, I'm talking about what we as humans know through scientific evidence. And just ask yourself, why is it that this is to be accepted so blindly without any type of proof or things that seem to be logical to humans when so many other things that appear just as illogical are dismissed out of hand? Hoppy's coming up after the top of the hour. Thanks for listening in. We'll see you tomorrow on the Morning Edition.